seeing beyond the surface. Richard Whitmore had always prided himself on being observant. You didn't build a technology empire worth $3 billion without noticing details. Yet somehow, he had spent 5 years completely blind to the woman who organized his entire world. Dorothy Sullivan had been his executive assistant since the company's early days. Reliable as sunrise, efficient as clockwork, and so quietly competent that Richard had begun to take her presence for granted. She wore sensible cardigans, kept her graying hair in a neat bun, and never missed a meeting, a deadline, or a birthday card for his scattered family members. At 68, Richard had grown comfortable with his routines: board meetings, golf with investors, charity galas where he wrote checks and shook hands, the same faces, the same conversations, the same polished world that felt increasingly hollow as the years passed. When the invitation arrived for the Metropolitan Museum's annual fundraising gala, Richard barely glanced at it. Another evening of champagne and small talk with people who saw him as a wallet with legs. He was about to have send his usual regrets when a mischievous impulse struck him. He called from his office. Would you like to attend the Met Gala with me next Friday? The silence that followed lasted long enough for Richard to wonder if she'd heard him. When she appeared in his doorway, her expression was carefully neutral, the same professional mask she'd worn for 5 years. As your assistant, sir? To help coordinate? No, Richard interrupted, surprising himself with his sincerity. As my guest. I realized I've never properly thanked you for everything. Consider it a small token of appreciation. What he didn't expect was the way her face softened just for a moment, before the professional composure returned. That's very kind, Mr. Whitmore. I'd be honored. Friday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Manhattan feel magical. Richard straightened his bow tie and checked his watch, expecting to meet in the lobby as usual. When the elevator doors opened, he prepared to offer his arm to the familiar figure in sensible shoes and conservative attire. Instead, he found himself face to face with a vision that left him speechless. The woman before him moved with quiet grace, her silver hair catching the lobby's chandelier light like spun moonbeams. Her evening dress was a deep sapphire blue that brought out eyes Richard had never really noticed before, eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. There was something timeless about her elegance, like a classic film star who had stepped out of a golden age movie. Mr. Whitmore? She said softly, and it was definitely Dot's voice, but richer somehow, more confident. I hope I haven't kept you waiting. Richard struggled to find words. This was his assistant, the woman who had reminded him of his mother's birthday just that morning, who kept his schedule organized and his coffee cup filled. Yet standing before him was someone entirely new and entirely captivating. You look... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound foolish. You look absolutely radiant. A gentle blush colored her cheeks. Thank you. I must admit I haven't had many occasions to dress up in recent years. As they rode to the museum, Richard found himself really looking at her for perhaps the first time. The laugh lines around her eyes spoke of someone who had found joy despite life's challenges. The way she carried herself suggested a dignity that had nothing to do with designer clothes and everything to do with character. He said quietly. I have a confession. I invited you tonight somewhat carelessly, almost as an afterthought. He saw her face tighten slightly and rushed to continue. But seeing you now, I realize what a fool I've been, not just tonight, but for years. She turned to study his face, her expression thoughtful. How so? I've been so focused on building an empire that I forgot to see the people who made it possible, especially you. Richard's voice carried the weight of genuine regret. You've been the foundation of everything I've accomplished, and I've treated you like furniture, always there, reliable, but never truly seen. The museum gala was a revelation, but not in the way Richard had expected. It wasn't Dot's transformation that amazed the other guests, though she did turn heads and receive numerous compliments. It was watching her interact with people that opened Richard's eyes. She spoke knowledgeably about art with the museum director. She listened with genuine interest to a young entrepreneur's business ideas. She made an elderly donor laugh until tears ran down his cheeks. She was, Richard realized, exactly the same person she had always been. He had simply never bothered to notice. "You know," Dot said as they stood before a beautiful Monet painting, "I studied art history in college. Always dreamed of working in a museum, but life had other plans." Richard felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. "Do you regret it?" She smiled, and there was no bitterness in it. Regret is too strong a word. We all make choices, adapt to circumstances. I found purpose in helping you build something meaningful. That's not nothing. But your dreams change, Richard. She used his first name so naturally that he barely noticed. Some dreams we chase, others we let go, and sometimes new dreams find us when we're not looking. As the evening wound down and they waited for the car, Richard found himself reluctant for it to end. Not because of how Dot looked, though she was undeniably beautiful, but because of how she made him feel. Seen, understood, reminded of the man he had been before success had built walls around his heart. "Dorothy," he said, using her full name for the first time in years, "would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not as my assistant, but as someone I'd very much like to know better." Her smile was worth more than all the deals he'd ever closed. "I'd like that very much, Richard. I'd like that very much indeed." Later, Richard would look back on this evening as the moment his real life began. Not because a plain woman had been transformed into a beauty, that was never the point, but because he had finally learned to see past the surface of things, to recognize the extraordinary that had been right in front of him all along. Sometimes the greatest transformations happen not in how we look, but in how we choose to see.